and he was part of the steering committee and planning for the big event, the big Career Connect Job Fair. Will's he's founder and president of Bullseye Recruiting, which you can see up here on the screen. It's a boutique sales recruiting agency, and they are also a major sponsor of Job Seekers Network. Will's been in sales and marketing for over 24 years and has placed talent both locally and globally. And he's worked for such companies as Dell and Balfour and eBay and Rosetta Stone. And Bullseye Recruiting is consistently recognized as one of the top recruiting agencies here in Austin. He and his wife Laura have 2 kids, and they attend Gateway Church. So Will, come on up and share with us this morning. Thank you for coming. You're good. You're green. You have the green on.
Am I live? Okay, cool. How's everybody doing this morning? Good, good. Anybody watch the Masters, Tiger Woods? Won. Astros won 9 in a row. That was kind of cool. Who enjoyed the sun outside on Sunday? That was beautiful. Yeah, I was enjoying it. I'm a Jeep rider, so that's my new my guilt. So anyway, thanks for coming today. Today's gonna be very interactive. So I have some slides, but it's not gonna be one of those where it's I'm gonna be walking down a PowerPoint where you guys are gonna be bored to death. It's Monday morning, so I hope that you guys enjoy it. But I want it to be very interactive. I want the audience to interact as well. So I'll be calling upon you guys to ask questions from you as well. So, and ask questions from me as we go along. So anyway, what we're going to talk to you about today is the top 20 interview pitfalls and how to turn them around. So I know that, interviewing is kind of, it's hard, right? I mean, how many of you, I want to kind of get a poll from the audience. And I've met some of you guys at the career fair last week. But how many people are recently unemployed? Okay. How many of you were part of a layoff? Okay. How many of you are underemployed? Okay. Because that's what happens, right? You're taking jobs that you don't want. And how many of you have been with the job for so long, it's hard to remember how to interview, right? And that's kind of what we're going to go over. A lot of this stuff's basic, but I want to share some stories with you, tell you a little bit about some things that I've seen. I want you to ask questions because sometimes we're just rusty on interviewing. Sometimes I know a lot of people in this audience probably have interviewed other people but are out of practice of interviewing themselves. Is that right? Okay, cool. Well, that's what we're going to talk about, the things that we're going to talk about today. So a little bit about myself, and Craig, thank you for the introduction. I'm part of the board of directors here at Launchpad, not Launchpad, Job Seekers Network, and I absolutely love being a part of this. The reason I'm part of this is that in 2008, I found myself out of work. I was unemployed. I was in sales. I got fired. I was not doing what I thought I would do, and I was not hitting the quotas that I needed to hit, and I went through 54 interviews. That's a lot. So my wife was pregnant, and it was the most scary time in my entire life. And God works in mysterious ways. He never says life's going to be easy or that He gives you challenges, and it's hard at the time to say that at that particular moment in time that that was something that was going to build character. But I think what happened in those 54 interviews is it's helped me grow as an individual. It helped me start my own business. It has helped me as an individual be able to teach and pass along a few things. Now, today, I hope that you get 1 or 2 good nuggets. That's it. If you guys come out of here saying, Will, thank you for that one thing you said, then I've done my job. I don't know if you're going to find a job through me, but I can promise you this, that I will do everything I possibly can do to give you some bit of advice, or share you some kind of story of something that I have experienced or seen. Like Craig said, I've placed people in Austin, I've placed people all around the United States and around the world. So, I hope that gives you a little bit. I'm from Austin. Anybody else from Austin here? Not many, but yeah, I was born in Westlake. I've watched the city grow up. I don't like Austin as much as I used to at all. It's grown up quite a bit. I've been in sales and recruiting for about 25 years. I do have 2 kids. One of them's named Kennedy, and she's 11. She plays kickball. She's involved with dance. I have a son named Trace who does lacrosse. So anybody have any lacrosse fans here? I didn't know anything about the sport until my son did it. But anyway, I'm a born-again gym rat. I hadn't worked out in 10 years and decided that January 1st I would go work out. So that's new. If you guys decide to change, you can, right? Anyway, that's a little bit about me. So we all make mistakes. Just this past weekend, is pollen get anybody? Yeah, holy cow. So we had all this pollen all over our deck in our yard, and here I am walking around, and I have 2 rakes, and yes, this did happen. So I sit there, and I'm raking, and all of a sudden I step on the other rake, and it hits me right in the head, and I have this big bruise on my head because of because of the rake being there. I told my son, he said, "Dad, doesn't that just happen on cartoons?" I'm like, well, it does happen in real life too. So the things that I'm going to tell you, in interviewing is that mistakes do happen, right? And it's just what we learn from them and then how we can move forward. So the best advice I can tell you is to be humble, to be kind, admit your mistakes and learn from them. That's the main thing, right? So in interviewing, we make some bonehead mistakes, right? So hopefully, at the end of this, you'll be like, oh, I should have done this or I should have done that. And these are things that you probably know, right? There's not any rocket science to this, but this is probably, something that you can learn from. And treat people as you want to be treated. That's, this is part of a Christian group here. I want you to remember that. If you make a mistake, admit it, and then move on, right? Treat people like you want to be treated. So we're going to go through 20 of these. And each one, I want you guys to say, hey, listen, I have a question, or what about this, or hey, I went and did this, because, that's going to make this fun and interesting. As you can see, there's not a lot of bullet points underneath. There's a picture and a number 1 or number 2. So we're going to go in each one of them, and hopefully you learn a few things. Not doing research on the company. Who here can admit that they've gone to an interview and not know much about the company? Because life gets busy, right? You've got the Masters to watch. There's all sorts of things that happen in your life that you just are not that prepared to do the interview. Recently, I had an individual that was going in for an account manager role. Anybody know what an account manager is, right? Sales. So basically, you're managing a set of accounts, and on paper, it looked unbelievable. He hit every single bullet point. It's like, this is a slam dunk. But the one thing this guy didn't do is do any research on the organization. Went into the interview, and he said, the first question that was asked was not, how are your account management skills, but what do you know about me? What do you know about our company? What do we do? And he said, well, you're a software company? He goes, yeah, can you tell me a little bit more? You're in the oil and gas field, right? Yeah, what else do you know? And that's where it ended. The conversation was over. There wasn't anything more said. They didn't know anything more about the company or the role. How many of you guys get phone calls from recruiters on a daily basis? A weekly basis, right? You can't keep up with all of them sometimes. Sometimes you're like, you may have 2 or 3, and sometimes you may have none. That has happened to me. But, sometimes there's just so much to keep up with. You don't know what, but you need to keep it straight. You need to really spend time on the job site. I have a job that a company, I'm saying, it's very technical, and you have to learn everything you need to know about that job before you go into the interview, because it's pretty technical stuff. How many people are technical people here in this audience? a lot, right? So, I mean, what specifically about their technology is cool? How have they grown as an organization? Those are really important things to know, right? So, anybody have any stories to share about this, about not doing research or doing research and how it's helped you in an interview? Just raise your hand, and we have a microphone in the back.
I was interviewing for a very good job that I really wanted, and I accidentally in my head had switched, because I was interviewing for a lot of jobs at the same time, and
Yes.
I had kind of switched in my head jobs, and I was into the interview, and the lady said, "I think you have the job description wrong," and I was like, "Oh my God," because I had been researching so many different companies. And she said, "Did you think this was a customer-facing job?" And I was like, "Well, it was a customer success role, but this specific role was working with her only and not with a customer," and I had messed that up. So guess that interview was over right then.
Thank you for sharing that, because that happens. And I think as the economy's hot, there are a lot of companies that are interviewing, and we do get mixed up. So just make sure you have a calendar, make sure you know what's what, and spend time on them with each and every person before you interview, okay? Now, this sounds stupid, right? Showing up late for an interview, but who here has been late for an interview recently? I have. Because Austin traffic sucks. I have kids. I got to get them somewhere, I didn't realize that there was a fob that you needed to get into a building. So there's all sorts of questions that you have to ask when you go in an interview. But do you know that companies, apps, this is their biggest number one pet peeve, showing up late? And it happens all the time. Or showing up too early. Who's showing up way early just to make sure they're on time? Be careful. Don't get in there about 30 minutes too early, because they'll think, "Oh my God, this person is desperate." So show up on time, or show up in the office on time, but make sure you get the address correct. If you want to spend some time going beforehand to the interview and the day before, and finding out where it is, how much traffic there is. Waze is incorrect. Google Maps is incorrect sometimes, right? I hate when that happens, but it's true. And Austin traffic is totally unpredictable, so allot yourself plenty of time when you go on an interview. So any stories here? Okay, go ahead.
I showed up at Dell for an interview, and all the buildings were marked except the one I needed to be at.
Exactly.
So I spent 10 minutes, in the parking lot circling. I mean, I knew where the building was, but, go scout it out.
Yeah, I mean, the day before, just go drive it and make sure that you know exactly where it is. And if you have a recruiter that's helping represent you, make sure you ask them, right? Okay, go ahead.
I just actually had a question. I mean, let's say something happens, there's an accident in front of you. Is it acceptable to just call them and say, "Look, this happened"? I mean, when I'm interviewing someone, I understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, be kind, be honest, do these. If you call 10 minutes in advance, I mean, the other day I was going to the to go meet with a client, and there was the ACC tournament, and there I was like, "Look, I didn't really think about the traffic." I really didn't. I mean, I wasn't expecting this. He goes, "Man, it happens all the time. Don't worry about it." So, I mean, yes, that's totally acceptable. Just place a call, 30 minutes earlier. Says Waze says I'm going to be there 15 minutes late. I'm so sorry. I got caught up. I'm driving from San Antonio. Not a big deal. But as long as you make those calls, then I think you're going to be okay. Okay. So, cell phones. The thing about cell phones is we forget that they're in our pockets, right? We forget that they actually have a ringer on. How many people have been to church or an event and you hear a phone go off accidentally? It happens, right? So the best advice I have for you on this is just leave the cell phone in the car. I think that's, for me, like I said, I was a gym rat. I leave the phone in the car from 7 o'clock until 8:30 because that is my time. I mark it off on my calendar. If you guys are coming to an event like this, mark it off in your calendar, leave it in your car, and this won't happen. I remember going with a client visit, and I was sitting there, and I was having this conversation, and it was just a damn telemarketer that called me 4 times in a row. And it looked really bad to the client. They're like, you can get that if you want. And I'm like, I'm so embarrassed, So the best advice here is just keep it in your car. Keep it at home. Just block off the time. It can wait. I mean, when you're with your children or with your family, I mean, the best thing for me to do is just leave the car and the cell phone because I can get distracted by anything. So just keep it away because you don't want them to think that you're not important to that interview. Anybody have any story here or about something similar?
I was just going to add to the recommendation that so many of us have iPhone watches now, and your watch will ring if you're
Yes.
careful.
Yes. So maybe leave your watch, in the car too, or wear something else because I think that's a big deal. I have the Fitbit watch, and I love tracking all the calories and junk. But I promise you this, that I don't want it connected to my cell phone, or it would drive me absolutely batty. But yes, you're right. Good point. Do you guys know who this guy is? Okay. Yeah, so I went to Ole Miss, and this really embarrassed me. But this is Laramie Tunsil. Okay, he was going to be the #1 draft pick in the NFL, and 2 minutes before him being drafted, this went live on Twitter. That's a gas mask for marijuana. So his draft status went from #1 to number 13. He lost $15 million because he had done something before he went to Ole Miss. So all I'm saying is that stuff goes with you till your grave. I have a good friend that actually interviewed with Matt Lauer before all the crazy stuff happened, and they said, social media stuff goes with you to your grave, and it's so true. So, I mean, just be careful about what you say. I know that no one here is going to show drunk pictures or something like that on social media or do something this stupid with a gas mask. But I do know that we do get, politics being something that's really crazy on Facebook. You talk about, oh man, Trump or, Obama or something like that. And you guys all know that gets kind of out of hand sometimes. Just kind of keep your mouth shut. That's what I would do because every client that I've been working with lately have asked me, have you checked their Facebook page out? Have you checked out their LinkedIn? Have you checked out their Twitter feed? And making sure that you don't say something absolutely crazy because that you're going to represent them. I used to be all for social media, and I kind of am still, but at the same point, if you don't have anything real positive to say, it's probably best not to say it. Anybody have any stories from social media they want to share, like Laramie Tunsil? Not this bad, right? Okay, go ahead.
Well, it's not really a story, but more of a recommendation because I don't really use social media. I rarely use it, but hey, because I don't have anything important going on in my life, I don't really pay attention to the news or politics in general, so that's better for me. So for any of you, just don't pay attention to the news. Don't get caught up in it because then your mind isn't going to think about it a whole lot, and then you could just think on yourself.
Thank you. So we'll just say, don't pull a Laramie Tunsil, right? Okay. So grammatical errors. I mean, obvious, right? But I have people asking me now to have them send an email or at some kind of writing sample before they get hired. So, I mean, a lot of people will use the words you or, rather than spelling out the whole word or lower caps when they send emails. Believe me, it happens. I was working with a company, and I had worked with this guy who had actually run a major health insurance company, and his spelling was so horrendous, and it was just so bad that it turned the client away. And I mean, I thought about it. I was like, you know, if this is somebody that is made $1 million with an insurance company, why is his punctuation so bad? Why is he using lower capital letters? Why is he using the letter U rather than Y-O-U? You know, and it happens every single day. Now, the cover letter and the, you know, the resume is a pretty easy fix, right? All you need to do is, you know, have someone proofread it, right? So I used to write a lot, and thank goodness my wife knows how to, good spelling, right? And she would read it and say, you know, honey, that looks pretty bad. And I'm like, okay, thanks for the advice. But has anyone ever seen bad grammatical errors like from a hiring manager and thought, you know, I really don't want to work for a guy like that? Any stories? Okay, go ahead. We got one right here.
I worked for a company, I guess it was my last contract, and we hired a VP of Ops, wonderful person, but they sent their resume, and it was such a small company, and there were a couple grammatical errors, and a lot of my coworkers, because we worked on the marketing side, were like, you know, we were so glad this person got hired, but we were like, good thing that, you know,
Yeah.
But I don't know, maybe it's just because we were kind of critical, like we had to do that as part of our job, but we're just like, especially in a C-level VP of Ops role, you're like, why is, you know, I think any role you don't want to have that, but definitely that higher level, you don't want to see those.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Here's one over here.
Yeah, but I don't think most C-level people write like that. That's my experience.
All right. So this is a big one.
I'd make a comment on that. I mean, I have kids that are at the age. I have a son that just got a job, graduated in December, and works for a company. But I've hired people. I mean, I always notice things like punctuation. You know, and it's kind of like dress. You know, you know, maybe you don't always do it, but that age, the text, you know, the texting age, and
Exactly, it's here.
You know, what you're texting to your family and friends is different than maybe what you're emailing in the sense of business, and it's easy to print emails and things like that. And you know, I think it's important to keep it in mind. I mean, you can type real quick and make mistakes, and I tend to do that. But if I'm sending something, it's like I want to proofread it.
Even in texting, I mean, to just practice writing YOU out instead of you, or okay rather than the letter K. You know, it's going to help you because you may forget those things when you're actually writing, you know, an email or something. Hopefully not. I don't think so, but this is a big one. I'm seeing a lot of people say, you know, I want 70K. Okay, well, you haven't even interviewed for the role yet you're demanding a salary. That inflexibility is really tough. And I mean, so I think, or, you know, saying, you know, I'm okay with taking 30K and selling yourself way too short. Let's ask what the range is, find out if it's a good fit for the company, and then talk about the company. If a recruiter's representing you, like me, then work with them. Say, hey, is this right within the right range? But please, when you're with a hiring manager, don't try to negotiate your salary on your first interview, because I think that's. You go ahead. I mean, I can tell you're wanting to say something.
Just the question is it's happened a couple times. They come right out and ask. They come out right at the beginning and ask you, right up in the front end of the interview, what you're asking for. What do you do there?
Yeah, I mean, what is the salary range? That's the best thing. Yes, that will work for me. And if it's a recruiter that is a third-party person like me, and the difference between a third party and a corporate is someone that is helping represent a company, just say, tell them what you want. I mean, let's just cut to the chase. And if it's not what you want, then that's great. But don't go into an interview after you've had a phone screen and then say, hey, listen, I want 90K. You know, I see it happen all the time. And I see it happen with the younger generation more often than, because, you know, people right out of college think they're worth, you know, $90K, and they don't have any experience. So, you know, just be cognizant of it. But anybody else have any stories or anything else they want to ask about that? Because salary negotiation is a big deal. Right. I did a whole presentation on salary negotiation before. It's a tough thing to come, but just be cognizant of when you ask. So, body language. Has anybody thought about body language? I know a lot of people in this room have been interviewers, right? So, I mean, if somebody is sitting down and you know, kind of going like this, then pay attention to that. You can do the same. I mean, don't be too stiff. But, you know, I think it's important to watch and mirror what they're doing at all times. If they're a little bit more up front, you know, on the table, then you do the same. I think it's going to speak a lot. I mean, it shows that your interest level. If you're too laid back and they're very intense, that's not going to work either. But more and more often than not, and I don't know how you guys have been experiencing in Austin, but most people are pretty laid back in interviews. Am I right? Anybody have anything to say about mirroring body language or anything like that? Any questions? It's pretty straightforward. This is the biggest one that we can talk about today. So you've been let go from a company. Don't say that don't try to extend the truth. Having a resume saying that you have, you're still working at a job and you're not, and they ask you directly, you better answer the question correctly. But lying, hey, I know how to code Python, and you really don't. Tell them you don't know how to do it. But if you say you do, then they're going to give you tests. That's going to happen, right? So be upfront, be honest. You know, if you're out of work and you've been out of work for a while, what have you been doing? I mean, sometimes we take care of parents that are ill, right? We go on a vacation with our family. We've spent time renovating a house. These things do happen in life. You've been doing a consulting work job on the side, but they'll ask you and say, well, you've been out of work since September. What have you been doing? Anybody heard that before? It happens, right? So it's just a matter of saying, well, since then, I've been going back to school. I've been studying up on my Java. I've been, you know, I went on a vacation with my family. Those are things that are okay to ask, okay? Anybody have any questions about where the gray matter is and how to answer it? Because this is a big one.
Right here.
What do you put on your resume as far as studying? Let's say it requires Java, and you've been studying for a couple months in order to get past the ATS or get noticed. What do you put on your resume to say, okay, I am studying it?
I mean, it can be an employment history. I mean, so if you started studying in December, you could put December 2018 till present, you know, studying to get, you know, the PMP or studying to get a Java certification. But you can also say to the employer, say, if you don't, you were let go for a layoff or something, so what have you been doing since? You said, well, listen, I really wanted to, I see that Java is the way of the future. I wanted to learn more about it, so that's why I did what I did, and that's what I've been doing. And that's okay. Yes, sir.
So if that's a requirement for the job, do you put that in the first 2 inches?
Like,
If you're studying for it?
yeah, why not? Yeah, I mean, I would say that that's important. If you know that's a requirement and you honestly are studying for it, then yeah, put it in there. Saying, listen, I've been reading books. I've been studying to. They're going to ask you specific questions, but you're not lying at that point in time. You know, you're just saying I'm gaining those skills, and this is why I want to be in this job. Cool.
Actually, I have a,
Yes.
On a resume, taking care of a family member on a resume.
Yep.
And then presenting that, should they ask?
I see absolutely, and listen to me, read my lips, absolutely no problem with that. Because if you're taking care of an ailing family member, that happens. I promise you. And there's times when you need to take time away from work for, being with your son that's about to graduate and move off to a different country. Or there's just, life happens. And I think as upfront as you possibly can be, that's totally fine. Absolutely. Absolutely.
well, actually, I had a question.
Yes, sir.
I had an interview this past week, and one of the things I've been doing, and I didn't know whether to share this or not, was delivering packages for Amazon. I'm working on my certification, I'm doing volunteer work, I shared all that, but I don't know, should I tell them I'm doing this little stuff to make ends meet?
I don't think so.
Okay.
You can, I mean, obviously, but I don't think that's important. I see a lot of people saying you're an Uber driver, or, we have to do what we have to do, but I don't think that's relevant. I would put on what you're trying to accomplish and how you're trying to do it, If they ask you in an interview, that's fine, but you don't need to put on a resume or anything like that. Well, at the time being, I'm delivering packages for Amazon, but, I'm doing this because I need to do this. But if you say that, be careful, because they may try to lower your salary as well. And you don't want that to happen.
As an FYI, we are working on our gaps video for the resumes, so how to handle gaps on your resume. Hopefully that'll be done within the next 3 weeks or so, so keep an eye out for it. And we had another question.
I did. Along those lines, what's an acceptable time frame? So is it 4 months, 6 months that you should be?
Well, it depends on, the circumstance. You could be a stay-at-home mom for 2 or 3 years, right? I mean, so you're trying to re-enter the workforce. If you have been laid off from a role, people will start looking at your resume, and I'm so sorry to have to tell you this, but they'll say, you've been out of work for a while, but put something on there that you've been doing that will help your case. Yeah. If it's 6 months or I would put something that you've been doing. If it's 4 months, I think you're probably just fine. Yeah. But sometimes you get laid off. If it's been June of last year, and you're still looking for an opportunity, which does happen, put something on there that it's going to help better you and help you get your job. You're doing some consulting work or something like that. These things happen. Listen, if you're in a high-level role, and you're trying to get in another high-level role, it can take up to a year sometimes, or longer. The higher you get in your career, the harder it is to find that next role. If you want to take an entry-level role, like for an example, I'm a sales recruiter, an account executive, it's not as big a deal. So I think this is what Becky was talking about, but employment gaps. Like I said, you've been doing some consulting. You've been doing something to help better yourself. But, I think you need to go in there with the story. And if you got to have the story down. It's almost like your sales pitch. If you have your sales pitch down and you present it in a way that makes sense. I haven't worked in the past 2 years because I wanted to be at home with my kids. That's okay. You've explained that gap. We're done, right? If I still don't want to hire you, then it's not the right job for you. But someone needs to hire you, because let me tell you this. There's a 3% unemployment rate. I think it's even lower than that. So we're going to have to start tapping into different resources here shortly, because you can't have the 20-year-old graduate for every single role. It's not going to happen. We need qualified people that are able to do the job. So if there is a gap, understand that there's a good chance you're going to get the job if you can explain it well. And I think we've kind of beat the dead horse with that one. If we can move to the next one, we'll go. Who here's canceled the day of the interview? That's my phone beeping, by the way, so I didn't leave it in the car. Who's canceled the day of the interview? Anybody? Have had them cancel. Yeah, and that happens, right? I get a lot of calls that say that, and I'll say this, that I've been doing this for a long time. If someone cancels the day of the interview, I have almost a 0% chance of that person getting placed. Because they aren't interested in the job, or they'll find someone else that is interested. So recently I had someone that on the day of the interview said, hey, listen, I'm running late to the interview because I just got finished with my interview at Google, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it. And they said, screw you. We're not going to hire you. You obviously have more stuff that's going on than I know of. But I'm glad to hear that no one's canceled the day of the interview. But you'd be surprised how much ghosting, have y'all heard the word ghosting, is going on out there, where people actually are non-responsive and disappearing from the interview process the day of the interview. Yes?
So a couple of weeks ago, I woke up with the flu.
Okay.
I lost my voice, and it was the day of an interview.
Okay.
And I almost canceled. In fact, I had an internal recruiter that I was working with, and I reached out to her and I said, listen, I'm not up for this. I'm not going to impress the hiring manager, and it was a hiring manager interview that day. I said, should I cancel? And she said, well, it's up to you, and she gave the same advice. If you do, you probably have zero chance of continuing on. So I went ahead and had the interview. I took some medication, felt a little better, got my voice, where I could talk on the phone. It was a phone interview. I had the interview, and after the interview, I sent a thank you note, and the hiring manager responded back and said, hey, the recruiter told me that you're really sick. I gave you great kudos for having the interview anyway. So, I didn't cancel. That's the flip side of this is, if you don't cancel and you go through with it, you might get additional credit for, living through the hardship.
That's great, and I agree. I think you did the right thing. It's kind of like who likes American Idol? I was watching my kids the other day. I still do. It's embarrassing, but yeah, the guys were all saying their throat hurt, and they're like, I don't care. This is the day of. This is your one time to shine. You made the show. You've got the interview. What are you gonna do with it? Like the Eminem song, right? The one shot, your one opportunity. Don't blow it. So I'm overdressed today, and I know it. I just felt like putting on a tie. I never dress up. You can ask Craig. I mean, I'm usually in a T-shirt and shorts and flip-flops 99% of the time. My wife was like, "What are you dressed up for?" I'm like, "I don't know. Just felt like dressing up today." But it's Austin, right? So the number one thing you need to ask when you go on an interview is, what is the culture of the company? Because sometimes you go into an interview and you're dressed like me in the monkey suit, right? And people will go, we're here, don't dress up, we're in jeans and flip-flops. And how awkward do you feel? Right? Or the other way around, where it is a very, it's a company that really likes people to dress up. And I've had that happen as well, where people will be casual because they're casual, but they expect you to dress up. So my number one advice is just to ask the recruiter, ask the company, what do you expect from me, right? Anything that anybody can add here that they've been in the city of Austin and have overdressed or underdressed? Anybody? Yes? Or just to ask, right?
Yeah, I showed up to an interview as an intern in a photo studio, and I had no idea what to dress like. I just wanted to impress the photographer, so I was wearing the same kind of thing I would wear to church, and he just kind of chuckled and said, did you really dress up for the interview? And I said, yeah, I didn't know what to do. And he said, well, we just wear jeans and T-shirts here. It's fine. But I still got to work with him, but it was just a quick lesson in know who you're interviewing with.
Right. I saw my wife's a nurse, and she interviewed 10 years ago, and she had, just had her scrubs on. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that's how you interview? And she's like, I'm a nurse. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. I would have dressed up, but she goes, no one dresses up for nurse interviews. So I thought that was funny. Shooting. So you got the job, right? And everything's great, and then you have the diarrhea of the mouth. Anybody ever had anything like that? Never? I have. So you're sitting there talking with someone, and then you're like, you're telling more and more about yourself, and you're like, man, I would just shut up if I were you. You've got the job, but I see it happen all the time. I see people go in there and say, well, I've got this, or I've got that, I've got this, I've got that. And if I could just take a zipper and zip it on someone's mouth, I think that would be great. Anybody have any stories about how they may have shot themselves in the foot by talking too much? It sounds like you guys are great. It's never happened. It's never happened to any of you guys? Okay, good. So preparing questions, and this is something that I want you to think about. I don't want you to go in there and say, so when did the company start? Who's your CEO of the company? What exactly does your product do? Because those questions do get asked. I want you to go in there and ask questions like, what kind of person are you looking for? What would be the best culture fit for you in this role? And if you can ask those kind of questions, what are your expectations of me? If you had 3 candidates lined up, what would the ideal candidate look like for you? What would I be doing to be very successful in this role? In 5 years, where do you see this company? Why did you join the company? I want to know why this company is better than 4 other companies. Tell me why you joined. Anybody else have anything that they would ask in an interview question? Okay, go ahead.
What problem can I solve for you?
Yeah. Good one. So I have the 10-minute warnings. We have 7 more to go, so I'm going to zip through these. Okay. Appearing desperate is another thing. I've had people recently go into an interview that I had a guy that was a young guy. He had been a professional athlete, and he was really one of the best candidates I'd seen in years. He went in there and he said, I want the job. I need the job. When can I get the offer letter? And they're like, man, I like you, but you're scaring me. It's kind of, it's like, why do you want a job? It seems like you need this job more than I need you. I'm scared of you. He had the skills, he had the track record, he had everything else. But the point was, he wasn't desperate. He had another offer from another company. He was trying to push them to make a decision, but it was the wrong way to push, And I think sometimes if you appear too desperate, or if you come in there and say, yeah, I got this job, man. I've been doing this 15 years. Yeah, no problem. I managed 20 people before. I can do this with my eyes closed. Well, this is an individual contributor role. This is not a role where you're going to be managing 15 people. I know you can do the job, but you're appearing a little arrogant to me. Anybody have any stories here? Well, if we've been out of work for a while, becoming desperate shows. Like I told you, in 2008, when I was out of work and I went through all those interviews, I can tell you, I asked people, I said, well, what could I have done differently? And more time, I had several people say, man, you just need to slow your roll just a minute, I wanted a job so badly that I didn't care what job it was, and you don't want that to happen. I know most of you guys do this, but What's the right way to do a follow-up? I think probably an email at this stage in game is probably the best way to send a quick email saying, thank you for the time. You may or may not get a response. 95% of the time, you're not going to get a response. Some companies don't care. The people that want to hire you do care. They want to hear from you. If they say call back within the next 24 hours, if you're interested in the job, call them back. Thank you letters, I mean, I don't know if they'll get it in time in today's hiring, but if you want to send a thank you letter, that's a lost art that I think is pretty cool. I've heard some cool things where people actually, just want to get their foot in the door and actually drop off a shoe, and I thought that was kind of wild. So, I mean, there's some things you can do that for follow-up that are pretty good. Yes, sir, go ahead.
What if you don't have, so I had an experience where I was talking to the internal recruiter for the company.
Mhm.
Then she set up, or she was HR, and set up an interview with two of the would-be colleagues for this job. And then after that interview, I was wondering, so what I did was I sent a thank you for setting up the meeting to the internal, or to the HR person, but I didn't have any contact information from the people I was interviewing with.
That's an awesome question, and it happens every single day. Thank you for asking it. Anybody else have that same issue? Yeah, I'm sure it happens. So what you can do, if you get an invite, typically the email address is in the invite. I don't know if you guys are, it's usually there. If it's not, ask an internal recruiter for the address. 9 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10, they'll give it to you. But make sure you ask, and it doesn't do any good to send it to the internal recruiter because they get they have 56 positions they're trying to fill, and it's going to go by the wayside. So make sure you get those hiring managers, not the internal recruiters' emails.
What about following up with LinkedIn with those people?
It's just adding them to the network. I think it's great to be connected to LinkedIn. I have a whole other presentation on LinkedIn, but I think that you should connect with as many people as you possibly can. I wouldn't do that as your follow-up email, though.
You wouldn't?
No, I would send an actual email and get the email address from the hiring manager. Anybody feel like you're in a room and you're like, things get kind of awkward? You're just kind of talking and talking and talking, and they're like, yeah, all right. And I have these skills, and I can do this. And, and I did this. And I can do this. And then really, I can tell you all about this. They're done. They're done. The interview's over. They've decided they like you or they're not. Doesn't matter what comes out of your mouth in the next 15, 20 minutes. They've decided, they've made up their mind. Most recruiters or hiring managers in the first 5 or 10 minutes make up their mind if they're going to hire you or not. Doesn't matter what you say. Do you guys agree with that? Okay. So if you're getting the feeling and they start looking at their watch, just be respectful of their time. Say, okay, I agree. Thank you so much, and just walk out. You may get lucky, but don't continue to beat a dead horse. Anybody have a story real quick on that? Okay, cool. We have 5 minutes. So, inflexibility is a big one. I won't do this. Sales is a big one for me. So that's what I recruit salespeople. So they'll say, I don't want a cold call. I know you say you're a salesperson. Well, good. Great. At sales, you cold call. That's part of it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. If you say you won't cold call, even though you're an account manager, you're telling me you don't really want the job, because that's showing me you have zero interest in doing what it takes to be successful, especially with all these startups out there. Saying, I don't want to do Java. Well, maybe 2% of your job is to do Java, but saying that you won't do it. Well, I usually give this job to John or Joe or Bob, and, I don't want to do that part. I'm just the manager of the people that do that. Anybody heard that before? Whenever that happens, you need to say, they'll walk away from you. So make sure you say, hey, listen, I'm open to any opportunities, but if it's not the right thing for you, don't apply. But don't waste their time or your time. Anybody, quick story? This drives me crazy. If you have a bad experience with a job person, think something positive. Remember, be kind. Treat people as you want to be treated. It was a great experience. I've learned this from my job. I feel like that has helped me grow as an individual in these areas. Not, my boss was a jerk, this is what so-and-so did at this job, and it was just awful. The coworkers I had just were not good people. They were unethical. This was a horrible situation. So whatever you got to say, just say something positive and leave it at that. Just like social media. If you don't have something good to say, don't say it at all. Just say what's good. So this is what I was talking about earlier, lack of responsiveness. If you just ghost or if you go away, then they're not, let's just say you're going on vacation, your cell phone's off for 4 days, and, that's tough. I know that most people in this room wouldn't do something like that, but, just make sure to communicate with people, hey, I'm going to be gone for the next couple of days, or, I'm going to be traveling. I'm not going to be able to respond to these things. So if that happens, just say, then they're going to respect you. But if you just go away, for example, I'm a business owner, and if I just left without telling people, hey, I may or may not be able to be reached for a couple of days, then that's fine. But just to go away and not say anything, to be off air is bad. Every one of us have something that's good and bad about ourselves. Some people have, strengths. We have strengths and weaknesses. We know we have strengths and weaknesses, right? For me, there's certain things that I'm great at, and there's certain things that I'm not. So I'm good with administrative tasks. I'm not. There's things that about recruiting that I'm wonderful at. I'm very good customer facing. I'm very good with a lot of things, but there's certain things that I'm not really great at. I don't like sitting in front of a computer for 14 hours and trying to find somebody. That to me is boring and it's hell, right? So if there's something out there that you're not great at, be able to articulate it and tell them what you can do that is good, right? And that's about it. But really think about what you are good at and what you're not good at. So guys, I'm Will Thompson. I recruit for sales, marketing, and HR roles, and there's my contact information. If you guys have any, I'll stick around for a minute. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them, but hopefully you got one or two nuggets walking out of here saying, that resonated with me. If I did that, then I did my job. So I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you, Will.